I am Armand Rosamilia. I am a full-time crime thriller and horror author in Jacksonville, Florida right now.
What got you into writing crime and thrillers?
You know, Dean Koontz, I always said for horror, what made me want to be a horror writer was Dean Koontz, but if you really read his stuff, it's more thriller than a lot of just straight horror stuff. And that's what I grew up on. From 12 years old, I read a ton of Dean Koontz, and then I moved into a lot of other authors from there that just I'm just always been a huge fan.
Did that start you on your writing journey, or did you have a different idea beforehand?
When I was 12, I started writing really bad Dean Koontz stories, like just total garbage ripoff things. And I wrote all through my teen years. And then I fell in love with a lot of horror books at that time as well. And so I started writing a lot more horror stories. I knew even then I didn't have the skills to set up and write a mystery. It was easier for me at 16 and 17 and 18 to write a monster
Yeah.
and have people fight a monster. And I was 18, I had my first story published. So this is 37 years now.
Mm.
My math is correct.
What inspires your books? Is there anything that sticks out to you when you're coming up with an idea for your horror or your crime books?
For me, it's the idea has to stay with me.
Hmm.
When I was younger, I would write every idea I had down in a notebook. I would carry a notebook around with me, and every idea was just going to be wonderful. And I would have, notebooks filled with a billion ideas, and none of them were very good. And I started to really think, you know what? I'm going to stop writing them down. I'm going to start um, thinking of ideas. And as a writer, you're just thinking of ideas. Everything is an idea coming at you. And the things that stick with me now that I'm still thinking about a week or two later, those are to me, those are the better ideas, and those are the things that I'm writing.
What's your process for writing your books? Do you wait for like a combination of ideas to come together, or is this one main idea that will st that has stuck with you for a week or two?
Usually an idea, especially a short story, will be a what if.
Yep.
And that's pretty much what I start with. I'm writing a story now about a former hitman who went into witness protection, and he's just an old man working behind a bar. And the what if question is, what if somebody from his past happens to just stray into this bar and recognizes him? What would happen in that, for that night?
Yeah.
So for me, that's it. I mean, once you get into a bigger idea, you got to come up with a lot of different what if questions.
Do you plot or do you let your characters sort of drive the story through
I'm
the
a
writing?
total pantser. I I, I get I've written I've worked with a company years ago, and they basically gave me an outline, or we would talk through an outline, and I would have to give them the outline of several pages so they could okay it, and then I write the story. And I was so bored with that story because I had already written it in that
Yeah.
5 or 6 pages. I just like the characters to just talk and let me know, figure out where they're going.
It makes it more creative as well because you can always they always might seem to block, put you into a spot and you're like, how can how can they get out
Yeah.
of this? Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
I've done that a lot in my career. I'm like, okay, I could kill this person in the bookends, or let me try to figure out where can I move back a couple of steps and go around. So it's challenging, and that's what makes it fun.
How do you choose which character to center the story around?
It's going to start with a character for me. The main character is usually what I'm starting with. I'm a I'm a big believer that if you have a great character
Hmm.
and a decent plot, you can still have a great book. But if you just have an all right character and you have a great, phenomenal plot, but there's nothing for the reader to sink their teeth into, um, to show ownership in that. When you read a character, you feel like you're that character, and I think that's so much more important. So it's gotta start with characters that the readers can maybe they're not going to necessarily identify with, but they can understand the character and try to see. Not everybody is going to be is going to read Jack Reacher and go, okay, oh, that's me. I was ex-military and I can, beat everybody up in this bar kind of thing. But you understand his goals, his motivations, and who the character is. And the reader, owns that. The reader is following that character no matter what they're doing.
I think that's how the books that stand out to me are the ones with the characters with and me knowing everything about them, even if it's across the book or a series or anything. That they're the books that I go back to and want to keep reading again because it's the characters.
You read those characters. That's what when I first started writing crime thriller stuff back in like 2015, so it's been like 10 years. My wife is a huge reader of thrillers and stuff, and she said you have to read Janet Ivanovic, the Stephanie Plum books. Like that's, and I said, well, tell me about and again, I'm coming from the horror where it's more
Mm.
about the plot and a lot of times the monster. And I said, well, what are these books about? And she's like, well, they're about her, and and then this guy she wants to date, but then there's another, and I'm like, no, no, I don't care about her. I want to know about the plot. And she's like, I'm not reading them for that. Like, I couldn't tell you what book five was, what the plot of it was, but I can tell you who the romantic interest was, what her and her friend were doing and stuff. And that was like a really good thing for me to realize that's how you really hook the reader by writing a memorable character.
And I guess it will cross genres as well. If you can get the character right, then it doesn't matter what genre you're
Yeah,
writing.
exactly. And that's I think that's the key. Whether you're no matter what genre you're writing, you have to have that character that the reader can relate to. Because what are your favorite books? And a lot of times people will throw out characters. People will throw out like Jack
Mm.
Reacher. People will throw out specific names of characters rather than specific names of books.
It's always, and then you might have to get them to actually tell you the book names. You can actually
Right.
find it to
Right.
read suggestion.
Then you try to figure out, I mean, I don't know what the name of the book is, but I mean, let's look up that character, you'll find
It'll come
it.
out. Google's helpful.
Yeah. I just read I just finished the last trilogy that Don Winslow is going to write, and it's the Danny Ryan trilogy.
Mm.
And I told a friend, I said, you got to read these books. And they're like, what's the name of the books? And I'm like, I don't know, just look up Don Winslow and it's the Danny Ryan books. It's like I don't even remember what the three books the names are, but I know that this is the characters what you have to read.
What's your approach to world and character building since the character's the main focus of your books?
I when I'm writing a character, I try not to get too specific because again, I want the reader to find some ownership in that.
Hmm.
So if I'm detailing a character, I don't want to give, back in the day, you would write the character wakes up and looks in the mirror and sees 5'7", brown hair, blue eyes, but like that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and detail all the character. And I don't do that. A lot of my characters you might know their age, and you might know two or three facts about them, like physically, but you're not going to really. I'm not going to go through like the whole thing. Like I have uh, a hit woman, Renee, that goes through a bunch of my books and in a lot of my short stories, and she's a BBW. She's a big girl, and
Mm.
she's like a 350 400 pound woman, and she's a hitman and nobody suspects this smiling, woman sitting in the corner that she's going to end up killing you that night. And but I don't give her any other physical description. That's enough. You know what she looks like.
Yeah.
You you're following her because of the character, because of the personality and the other stuff. And I think that was really important not to overdo it. Not to get into what she's wearing and any of the other stuff that has to go along with that.
Do you have a sort of a character sheet that you sort of have on the side with you before you start writing your books, or you get to know your characters as you write
I
them?
literally, I have this piece of paper, see, it has like four names on it. That's literally, I'm like 40,000 words into a book, and this is all I have. That's the new
Oh,
that's like the fourth book in the series, and I write the new characters' names down. And there's literally nothing like this. Literally says Jimbo Rankin security guard. That's all I wrote about him. So it's all in my head. I'm remembering things about the character, but and then the beta readers sometimes will say, "Hey, this is you said this guy had this or this guy was short or tall, whatever, and you screwed that up, and then I got to go back in and do it because I'm also writing. I don't know, 15 different stories at the same time. I don't just start and stop and go through a book. So I have like four novels I'm writing right now and a bunch of short stories.
no.
And it depends on what my mood is when what which ones I'm writing or what the deadlines are.
That's amazing that you can keep track and you have all those characters and books in your head to
So,
get
yeah,
down.
it's easier when my back isn't hurting and I don't have the sciatica.
Yeah.
If I'm clear headed, I can sit down and I can write, and it's I mean that's the fun of it, you know. The fun is to get up and have my cup of coffee and go, okay, whose head do I want to jump into right now? You know, which story do I want to play with?
That's amazing. Do you have a favorite moment in a particular book that you've written that you liked or really enjoyed to write?
There's so many um scenes that I've really liked. The best scenes for me are um when I'm writing something like again, I'm a full-time author, so I'm home all day. My
Yeah.
wife will go to work, and about every 10 days or so she'll come home and she'll say, put some pants on, take me to dinner because you're miserable, you haven't interacted. And we'll go to a restaurant and we'll have dinner, and I'm in a better mood. You know, I don't realize it at the time, but you get to that point where you're trapped in the house. And then I'll write a story, I'll write a book, and she's my usually my first reader. And she's brutal with the red pen, the clicking the red pen, sitting on the couch. And every now and then she'll laugh, and I'll say, "What?" And she's like, "I remember this conversation. You know, I
Wow.
remember this happening in the series." So my favorite, to answer your question, actually, is I was writing a series called the Flagler Beach Fiction Series, and it's
Mhm.
kind of like beach reads. It's not thrillers. It's just interact characters.
Yeah.
And I used to sit in this place called Kokomo's Cafe, and I used to write. My would drop my son off at high school, and I would sit from like 8 in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would write.
Mhm.
And I was sitting there, and they would have my table reserved every day. And there was an older woman and a man. I mean, like I'm talking like mid 70s at the table next to me. And listening to them, I realized she was breaking up with him,
Goodness.
and he was like confused. He's like, what's going on? She's like, I don't want to go on a cruise with you and your kids anymore. She's like, and I don't want your kids at my house because a couple of my plates are missing. And he's like, what? And I'm thinking, your kid's got to be like 50, right? I mean, it's not like your kids are, it says 75-year-old man has a 10-year-old. Like, you have to have like kids and grandkids. And she was like, so I don't want to do this anymore. And he was like, okay. So he gets up and she starts tapping the table. And he's like, what? And she's like, well, you're going to pay for this. So he takes a couple of 20s out of his wallet and he puts it on the table and he just walks out. And I'm just watching her and she's got this big smile on her face, like this super villain. And I thought, wow, what an awful person you are. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to kill her in a story. And then I ended up writing that story, and that's kind of what evolved into a 7 book series of stories, different stories like that.
Wow.
But when I went home and told my wife, like, listen to what this old lady did to this poor guy, his 50-year-old kids are stealing plates or something. I mean, it was a weird thing, but it again, 7 books later, that was a pretty neat kickoff for me.
That's amazing that just random interactions you over here can just turn into
Yeah,
books. That's amazing.
yeah.
Which of your characters do you relate to the most and why? Might be a little bit tricky.
So everybody says that my Dirty Deeds crime thriller series James Gaffney is the main character, and it's pretty much me. And as much as I thought that and denied that over the years, I mean, he has the same sense of humor. He has the same love of the same foods. He's overweight. He's um, sarcastic. He doesn't, and all that. And I would always go, "No, it's not me. It's not me." And my wife would be like, "This is you." So probably by about book 5 or 6, I just like, just stop, just own it. And that actually went a 12 book series. The first book was picked up by Kindle, so it was a Kindle Press book. The
Mhm.
first one, which was great working directly with Amazon on that one. And then I ended up writing 11 more books, um, over the next few years. And so that character is completely me. And a lot of, if you read through the book, a lot of my life stuff happens in that book, which is kind of neat. Once you're like, all right, let me stop fighting this. Everybody who knows me who's read the book is like, that's you, you know.
Can't help it sometimes there's gonna be at least a few characters that have bits and pieces
Well, yeah. I
in
mean,
it as well.
it's the you write what you know,
Yeah.
and it's not like, oh, I'm an accountant, so I have to write about a character who's an accountant. But the things that you learn, the things that the people around you, the shows that you watch, the books that you read. Yeah, I
Mm,
think that's all that stuff is important.
definitely. How has writing and publishing books changed the way you see yourself, if it has?
At 12 years old, I was, didn't have a lot of friends. I was a total geek, Dungeons and Dragons and reading, books and everything else, and wasn't going out for sports or any of that stuff. And I had a very small group of friends that we were all loyal to each other. And I always wanted to be a writer. I always wanted to do this. And I got lost for many years. I was a retail manager, and I hated every second of it, and I hated every customer and every person I worked with, and just all of it. And it really got to the point, but to be 13 years now, 14 years, that I had a chance to not go back into that.
Mm,
I was laid off, and I was with somebody that was just not very nice to me. And I decided, you know what? I don't want to go back to doing retail and for the rest of my life. And I think that was a turning point for me. I realized, you know what? Maybe I'm not a great writer, but I think I'm good enough. I can sell some books here. I think I can make some money doing this. And I really just, all eggs in one basket kind of thing. And it ended up working out.
and so good that no matter what happens, like you just need to trust in yourself and
Yeah. And
have
I
a look
was,
at
from a
creative.
young age, I just was not, I was not my biggest fan. Everything was negative with me, and I had great parents. I grew up in a great environment, but I just really doubted myself on everything, and I thought I'm going to be this retail manager for the rest of my life, and I'm making money. I'm making a paycheck, and I got 3 kids I have to support. So that's more important than anything.
And now you're a full-time author doing what you love.
Exactly. I'm living the dream.
You touched on this earlier as well, but are there any books or authors that inspired you in your writing that you sort of want to?
I think everything I read is inspiring now. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read mostly nonfiction, but there are some authors that I will read, and I just love. There are some authors that I read and I hate because they write so well, because they're such a great writer, and it aggravates me. Like I pick up an essay Cosby book now, and I'm mad.
Yeah.
I'm like, why can't I write like this? Don Winslow is a new one for me, and I'm just like, these books are just so well written,
Mm,
and I find that I love those authors, but I read a Jordan Harper book, the latest Jordan Harper book, and then I didn't write for like 2 weeks because the book is just so good, because these people are just phenomenal,
yeah.
and I think it went from reading Dean Koontz books and reading all those horror books from the 80s and reading um you know uh H.P. Lovecraft and reading all just random, Robert E. Howard and all just random things and just loving those books and thinking, I want to write like this.
Mm.
And now I'm like, I can write like this. I have a lot of peers in this industry now. But then I read, the latest S.A. Kazi book, and I'm so mad. I'm
I
just
get
so
it.
jealous of the talent.
Everyone and the different writing styles and sort of like, I really like how you do this, damn it. Why can't
Yeah.
I?
Yeah, I always say I do my petty thing, and I tell my writer friends, I'll say, hey, read this, like, again, the new Jordan Harper book when that came out a couple months ago, and I said, hey, they said, did you read it? I said, oh, it was great. I said, oh yeah, he probably had like 10 editors on this. There's no way this guy can write this well. And like, you say stupid things like that, and they all know that I'm saying, because I'm like so envious of the talent that these people have.
Are there any advice that you would give to a writer working on their first book?
Don't throw everything into it. Don't throw in the kitchen sink. I see that a lot. There's a writer that I know now that has written his first book, and it's like 5 or 6 years he's been writing this book, and it's a horror book, and it's like 150,000 words, which is not a horror book.
Yeah.
And you're throwing everything, and I'm like, dude, that's 3 books. You just wrote 3 books worth of stuff, and you really need. But it's that, and I did it, when I was 18, when I was writing, awful books. I was just trying to get everything in, as if, um you just don't know what you're doing, and so really, you got to just. 1988 was my first short story was published. I was a senior in high school, and all through the 90s I wrote a ton of short stories that I had published in zines, and you young kids look up what a zine is. And I'm glad none of those stories are out there, because they were awful. Because it's like my first million words were just god awful. And so for writers now that are just writing a book and then immediately putting it out, I'm like,
Mm,
that's, you got to write a lot before you figure out your voice and who you are as a writer. And so I think that's one of the things, is don't be so quick to just be published. Just enjoy the writing process and enjoy finding who you are as a writer, what genre you like, and what genre you're going to do well in.
mm. And not everyone's going to be best at like the horror or the fantasy. You need to sort of find your little niche and
Yeah,
practice your craft before you
I
sort of.
wrote tons of science fiction, tons of fantasy stories,
Mm,
back in the day, and I'm not known for any of those, which is fine with me. I'm glad that people know me for the crime thriller stuff, but mostly they know me for 15 years of putting out horror books, zombie books, and monster
mm,
books and things like that. But if I had to go back, I would, and a lot of those first books that got published in 2008, 2009, I would have never published those books because they weren't very good.
And it's always everyone's so quick to want the immediate feedback as well when sort of you need the time to edit and go over and sit with the book for a while.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think as you're writing that book, you're hopefully getting better as a writer.
Mm,
And there's a friend of mine who's released a couple of books, and yeah, I mean, he's very happy with the books, and I'm happy for him. But I always say, in 5 years, you want these books to be an embarrassment because you've gotten so much better. And if
yeah.
5 years from now this is still the best you're going to do, then you're a crappy writer. You're not going to progress at all, you
You
know?
need to improve as you write
Yeah,
more.
definitely.
Do you have a writing favorite writing snack or drink?
So I drink a lot of coffee, which again
Yeah.
is not good for the sciatica. And I am a big M&M fan. So whenever there's M&Ms in the house, it's usually in this room, unless my wife hides them from me.
They're very dangerous as well because you can just go through a packet really
Oh,
easy.
I will literally, I'll put like a pound bag of peanut M&Ms on the desk, and I'm writing, and then literally I'll hit my hand down, and it's empty, and I'm like, what? Who stole all my peanut M&Ms? Oh, I did. Over the last hour, I ate all of them.
Not too good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you play music while you write, or do you have just silence for you while you're writing?
Usually there's gonna be music on. Usually I have, and it's not. It doesn't really correlate to what I'm writing. So I know a lot of authors like I write fantasy, and so I have these symphonic metal bands that are playing, or oh, I'm gonna write a killing scene, so I'm gonna put, death metal on or whatever, or I'm
Hmm.
writing a romance, so I'm gonna have this. I just put songs that I know, and so it's background music.
Yeah,
I don't like listening to anything that's new that I'm not, because then I'm listening to the song or the lyrics. So like there's certain bands that I always have on that I'll just put on Spotify, and I'll just put the playlist of a certain band, and then it's just in the background for like the next couple of hours.
that's a perfect way to do it, I think, because I would listen to music, but I also like singing along to songs that I know. So it would be a very fine line about what
Yeah.
songs I would
And a
listen
lot of
to.
times I'll be singing, I'll catch myself singing along to the song, but it's not like, it's like my subconscious is
Yeah,
is is connected here to the thing, but then I'm still writing, and I'm still over here doing that.
that's
And
really
I
good.
know, and yeah, and I know I'm doing well in the story. I know the story's good when I don't even see that. Like sometimes if my wife is home on the weekends and I'm writing, and she's like, "What? What?" And I'm like, "I'm singing. Leave me alone. Don't interrupt me. I'm in the zone here."
Don't
She's like,
ruin the.
I thought you were talking to me." I'm like, "No, no, I'm singing. I'm singing along to Bowling for Soup. Leave me alone."
That's a good way to do the
Yeah.
song. And my final question is, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
Easily my wife.
Yeah.
When we started dating in 2012, I was already a full-time author, and she is a commercial property manager. So everything is numbers and all that. She's
Mm.
not a creative person. And when we first started dating, like maybe three, four dates into it, she said, "I'm going to ask you some questions. Like how much do you make good money doing this?" I said, "Yeah, I'm able to support myself and three kids." And she's like, "Well, how many words do you write?" I'm like, "Oh, I write a lot of words." And I was giving her all these kind of answers, and she was like, "Well, do you know the answers to any of these?" I'm like, "I don't keep track of that. I'm creative. I just write." And she's like, "Well, how many words do you think you write in a year?" And I said, "I have no idea." She's like, "Why don't you keep track of it?" And I said, "I don't know. That might be cool." So she made me a spreadsheet. And so now, since like 2013, I've literally from October 1st, which is because she created it in September. So October 1st to, the last day in September, that's my fiscal writing year, I call it. And I
Wow.
keep track, and I write between 400 and 500,000 words a year. So I'm
That's
better. I can, on my board, I can say, these are the books I want to write this year, and this is 350,000 words or whatever it's going to be. And then I'm going to fill in with some short stories and stuff. So I kind of get an idea of what my next 18 months is going to be. And I just roll it every month. Okay, this month's gone. And also keeping track of my money, because I looked at, oh, I'm not doing well, because I'm not doing great on, oh, I'm making $300 a month on Amazon. But the
mm,
reality was, I was making money from royalties from publishers. I was making, my Patreon was making $100, $200 a month at the time. So I was doing all these like little nickel and dime things. And I'm like, oh, I'm actually, once you put it all together on a spreadsheet and keep track, excuse me, I'm actually making a living doing this.
that's amazing. Just like the slight shift as well, the outside view coming in as well, and sort of
Yeah.
keeping you on
It, it,
track.
be- it, it's, it was, I realized at that point, is this a hobby for me, or is this a business?
Mm,
So this has got to be a business. So I do a lot of book signings. We do a lot of trips. I go to a lot of conferences and stuff. And then my wife has trained me to keep track of everything and every receipt and any, hotels and everything that I do now. It's all kept track of, because then gets written off on my taxes every year.
that's a, that's really good that she's there to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would be completely lost without her.
You need that put someone in the background to
Yeah.
keep.
Yeah, because as a creative person, you're not thinking of all that
No.
stuff. So, but people say, what's the best money you ever spent on writing? I say, taking her out to dinner that first night,
Yeah.
because it's led to me being able to sustain this as a career, and hopefully never ever having to go back into, retail management. A lot of my friends always say, well, I want to get to that point, and I said, I'm not trying to be rude, but does your wife have a career? Does she make good money? Because my wife
Mm,
does. We don't need my money. My money is play money. My money is, we go to 3 or 4 conferences every year. We do, we'll do different things like that. I'm from New Jersey originally. We'll go up every year. We used to go up and do like 2 or 3 weekends of doing signings in breweries and stuff. But
mm.
all that money was the money I'm making to spend, and if we broke even, or if we lost money, doesn't matter. It's all getting written off at the end of the year anyway.
Yeah, you need the sort of the another income if you're wanting to
Yeah.
do it, just to make the have the safety of it.
Yeah. I don't want to be relied on to make sure the lights stay on.
Yeah.
That would be awful pressure.
And hinder your creativity as well with that in the background as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.